So anyway, those are some of the various themes that we're going here. And yet, somehow, to bring it all back around, Donald Trump manages to tack on immigration onto this in some way. So let us return to our story. So Trump had originally said he would temporarily suspend immigration from Muslims, but he was starting to soften that idea in recent weeks. But after Sunday's horror, he went further. Quote, "The ban will be lifted when we as a nation are in a position to properly and perfectly screen those people coming into our country. We are importing radical Islamic terrorism into the West through a failed immigration system." Again, how radical Islamic terrorism, whatever that is, has been imported through immigration, and what that has to do with this guy that went and shot up a nightclub on Sunday night, who was an American, born and bred and raised here, I don't know. I'm not sure how our immigration system had anything whatsoever to do with that. But anyway, so Trump also attacked presumptive Democratic nominee Hillary Clinton through his speech, saying she cannot be a friend of the gay community as long as she supports current immigration policies. The shooting took place at a nightclub frequented by members of the LGBT community. He said Clinton wants to ban guns and abolish the Second Amendment. In parentheses, Clinton has never said she wants to ban guns or the Second Amendment, but she does support banning assault weapons. Trump noted that he would be meeting with the NRA to discuss how to ensure Americans have the means to protect themselves in this age of terror. Well, you know, that gets us back to the gun thing. So whenever somebody shoots somebody, some people say, well, if they hadn't had a gun, they wouldn't have shot anybody. And other people say, well, if the other person had a gun, they wouldn't have been shot. The person trying to shoot them would have shot them. So aside from the fact that logic, all other things aside, just logic, if you had less guns, you would have less people being shot with them. Period. There is no other way that equation works. Less guns means less people being shot. More guns means more people potentially being shot. Now, you could have 1 billion guns and no one ever fired one, so no one would ever be shot. But more guns makes it more likely, much easier, and more accessible for people to shoot people. Period. That is just straight up logic. There's no way you can argue with that in any way. Where these arguments become complex is, what role do guns play? Guns don't cause the violence. Well, no, they don't. People are violent. There are some people who are violent. All the guns are doing is making it easier for those people to do something with that violence that is destructive to somebody else. That's all that's happening as far as guns are concerned. So a lot of what is said about guns is just propaganda, and it's nonsense. I mean, less guns means less people being shot, less shooting. I'll put it that way. Less guns means less shooting. No guns in the world means no shooting in the world. So I guess, you know, that's kind of beside the point, excuse me, but it bears saying when people start bringing this stuff up that if you don't want people to be shot, you don't let them have guns. Anyway, so I don't know. Well, okay, I'll finish this off. Trump's attacking Hillary, then he attacks Obama, etc. Anyway, to finish it up, Trump says, as president, I will give our intelligence community, law enforcement, and military the tools they need to prevent terrorist attacks. Truly, our president doesn't know what he is doing. He has failed us and failed us badly, and under his leadership, this situation will not get any better. It will only get worse, blah, blah, blah. So that's his that's using this as an excuse to attack people. But it's interesting that he uses it as an excuse to attack immigration. So he's been attacking immigration all along. Mexicans, anybody, everybody, whoever an immigrant is that's coming in, Trump has been, finding some reason to be against them. And now kind of what he's saying is that second-generation immigrants are bad news, and they shouldn't be here if their parents apparently come from a country that the U.S. has some problem with. So basically, I don't know if this is I think it's a sort of a mixture of racism and nationalism and xenophobia and nativism. I don't even know if you can call it that, because a lot of the people that he's against are Americans. They're U.S. citizens, born here. By his logic, I would be, hitting the thing. I would be dangerous. I'm a second-generation immigrant, and apparently I would be a problem based around his logic. So here, if you're wondering, if you ever wondered how people play politics, I think a lot of the people that do that are really good at it. So they draw out very neatly worded critiques that manage to implicate things that they're against without actually, coming out and saying that this A caused B, and therefore B's, or A caused B, and since B is bad, then A is bad. I think that's kind of the theme of a lot of this stuff, but it's usually done so much better. Where Trump falls down is one, the extreme nature of his utterances. He doesn't insinuate, he just goes all out and says the stuff. And two, he just does it very badly. And so it's really obvious what he's trying to do. He's trying to drag immigration into immigration and terrorism and somehow conflate them so that they become the same thing. So that if you're afraid of terrorism, you're afraid of immigration. Now, there are a lot of people who are anti-immigration, and in part because they're afraid of terrorism. So people have been doing this for a while. Trump didn't begin it. He's just so clumsy about it and ham-fisted that that it's just it's obvious to anybody but a fool, anyway, I guess, that that's what he's trying to do. And so it makes it easier, I guess, to point out where this is being done. But it's not just Trump. And so here we have an article from something called The Week. I don't know what The Week is. It's entitled "The GOP's Hopelessly Complicated Immigration Politics." This was written, well, I don't know when it was written. Anyway, so it reads as follows. While Hillary Clinton was shattering one more glass ceiling on her way to the Democratic presidential nomination last week, no Republican senatorial candidate even managed to advance to the general election in California's nonpartisan jungle primary. In November, the state that gave America Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan will not have a Republican candidate for U.S. Senate on the ballot. Instead, two Democrats will face off in the general election, since they were the two top vote-getters in California's primary. Distant Democratic runner-up Loretta Sanchez ran more than 500,000 votes ahead of the top Republican vote-getter, who received just 8% of the statewide vote. This is the first time this has happened in California since the direct election of senators began, and it raises an important question. Is the GOP's tough-on-immigration stance to blame for turning the nation's biggest state so clearly and reliably blue? After all, Latinos now outnumber whites in the Golden State. Donald Trump's supporters often urge critics to look at California. If you don't reduce immigration, they contend, a flood of liberal Latinos will enter the country and turn the entire U.S. as democratic as the Golden State. It's the destiny of demographics, and the conservative agenda will be sunk. Nonsense, counters Trump detractors. It was precisely the kind of anti-immigrant policies that Trump is peddling that led to Proposition 187, a 1994 California ballot initiative backed by then-Governor Pete Wilson that prevented illegal immigrants from utilizing government services. This alienated a generation of Latino voters and turned California into a one-party Democratic state. Trying to control the influx of Latino immigrants, Trump's critics say, will only alienate the tens of millions of Latinos who are already here. Of course, as with most things in life, the politics of immigration are more complicated than either side claims. In 1992, California went big for Bill Clinton and elected two liberal Democratic senators, Barbara Boxer and Dianne Feinstein. That was 2 full years before Prop 187 passed. As for Wilson, he managed to get himself reelected in 1994 by campaigning as a supporter of the initiative, which itself passed easily, with 59% of the black vote and 31% of the Latino vote. And though Prop 187 has come to be seen as Wilson's eventual downfall, it didn't necessarily turn California blue. You may recall that California recalled a highly unpopular Democratic governor in 2003 and replaced him with a Republican movie star. Still, Trump has taken things much further than immigration restrictionists in the GOP typically do. Exhibit A is attacks on the federal judge handling the Trump University case. Trump argues that the judge is biased against him because of his Mexican heritage. The remark has been justly criticized because Trump offered no evidence that Judge Gonzalo Curia was actually biased, all while calling a native-born American a Mexican. Yet as Trump's critics within the GOP implicitly acknowledge when they argue his immigration stance will doom the party with the descendants of recent immigrants for generations, heritage does matter. This is true even when you take immigration out of the picture and just look at people with long ties to the United States. William T. Sherman is a war hero up north, a war criminal to many with Southern roots. To the white descendant of a Confederate soldier and the black descendant of American slaves, the Confederate battle flag represents entirely different things. These different perspectives can influence how people vote for generations. It takes time for them to lose their salience, just as it takes time for immigrant groups to assimilate culturally and economically. With rare exceptions, such as refugees fleeing communist countries like Cuba during the Cold War, immigrant groups have only started voting for the Republican Party once that assimilation has already taken place. If Republican champions of increased immigration make assimilation sound too easy, some Trump-style restrictionist speaks as if it cannot happen at all. The Irish American, German American, Italian American, and even the occasional Latino showing up at Trump rallies donning "Make America Great Again" hats should tell them otherwise. Latinos have been becoming more socially liberal in recent years. Recent immigration groups have tended to vote for politicians who support legal abortion and same-sex marriage, and California is obviously no bastion of social conservatism. It's something that conservative advocates of more immigration ought to consider rather than simply arguing that various immigrant groups would be natural Republicans if it weren't for the immigration politics of people like Trump. But there's nothing inevitable about this. Realism about immigration shouldn't preclude talk about assimilation, outreach to Latino churches, or recognizing the potential of the explosive growth of global South Christianity to alter the contours of this issue in the future. People who come from different backgrounds can have common values. Trump has taken a half step in the direction of acknowledging this when he argued that he was interested in protecting first-generation American workers as 10th-generation ones. A more intelligent immigration debate might be too much to ask for during this crazy campaign, but it is something we sorely need. Well, I'm not sure what to make of this. I think this it hits some points that I think are realistic, and it misses a few. But it gets at the fact that immigration is complicated, and I think that is a point that I've been trying to make for a while. And I don't think that immigrants are naturally Democratic or Republican, but they do tend to respond to the politics of the time, and at least now, at this time, the Democratic Party is the one welcoming them, and the Republican Party is the one trying to send them away. So it's a pretty clear-cut divide. You don't have to go too far back. I think this is when Reagan and Bush Sr. were in the primaries. There's a video that on YouTube that a number of people have shared that I think I discussed a few weeks back, where I think I actually played a clip from that, where Bush Sr. and Ronald Reagan were talking about immigration, and they were making a lot of sense. They were making a whole lot of sense. So this hasn't always been a red slash blue divide on this issue. It has turned into one, and it has turned into one because, partly because of the sort of the radicalization of the Republican Party in recent years. They've been pretty much taken over by anti-immigrant forces within the party to make the Republican Party anti-immigration and the Democratic Party pro-immigration. And that has set the stage for something that I think is, given the demographics in this country, is bound to doom the Republican Party. So, I mean, it's a self-inflicted wound. It doesn't have to happen. It didn't have to happen. It doesn't have to be that way. It isn't a natural outgrowth of policy by any means. It is simply one group just became kind of obsessed with identity politics to such a degree that anybody who wasn't pretty much blonde and blue-eyed was an outsider and didn't belong. And that's kind of what happened to the Republican Party and immigration. And it's just not going to get any better anytime soon. It can't until the Republican Party is radically remade. And given the way Trump is leading it, or trying to lead it, or what he seems to be doing to it, it may just cease to exist here after this election. So who knows? Maybe there'll be a new party. Anyway, I have a few more minutes. And I thought I would read one last thing. This is entitled, "What's Happening to Two Undocumented Texas Valedictorians Says It All About the Immigration Debate." And this is from the Washington Post. And I think it explains what it's about, so I'll just read it without giving you any background. So, a pair of high school valedictorians in Texas have become the targets of social media attacks. Plenty of people are subject to abuse online, but those who dare to be anything other than white, straight, or male had better learn to practice deep breathing. This is especially true if one is also an undocumented immigrant who graduated high school at the top of one's class. This can be stated as simple fact because when it became public knowledge that the two girls had not only topped their high school classes, but were respectively headed to Yale University and the University of Texas at Austin, the internet went wild. The content of online insults, rebukes, and complaints shared about the two girls seemed to rotate around a theme. The essence, these girls, and they are girls, have gamed the system and are proud of it. And now they are preparing to do it again, taking some other students' places at Yale and UT. One mother and another child who graduated alongside one of the girls added that she never thought she would favor deporting a child who attended high school in the United States and never thought she would be a Trump supporter, but this situation had made her both. In truth, a pretty straight line can be drawn between the public reaction to these students and the current state of American immigration policies. The overlap in the sentiments expressed by so many of those who launched an online war against the students and voters convinced that their economic prospects would improve if the country only had a border wall really should not be missed. What's happening to the two young women in Texas doesn't just speak volumes about the uncivil state of affairs online, it reveals a lot about the way that Americans viewed immigration and immigrants overall. People tend to view the economy as a fixed pie where there is only so many jobs, said Alex Norosh, an immigration policy analyst at the Cato Institute, a libertarian think tank. He says people think there is only so much opportunity, and that's simply not true. People create jobs. People grow the economy. This is a failure to understand how the economy, how opportunity, actually works. The Cato Institute supports immigration reforms that would legalize most of the 11 million undocumented people living in the United States and altering the immigration system so that more people could relocate legally. As such, Noash does not regard the claims that these students have taken something that is not theirs as accurate, and he does not think that those who are angry are focused on the right things. Other people didn't work as hard and weren't as smart, said Norash. I favor competition and meritocracy, so I say good for these girls. Slots of educational institutions aren't granted based on nationality, and meritocracy doesn't stop at the border. These girls were smarter or worked harder, and therefore they have the opportunities that they do. Norwash's is indeed a no-holds-barred assessment of both the girls and those angered by them. It's worth recapping a few points here. The college prospects of the two valedictorians on whom so much abuse has been heaped are directly, not tangentially, related to the work required to be one's class valedictorian. So the slot that either girl will hold at a university was earned, not taken. There is not a fixed and final set of slots at every college, nor are there slots that belong to anyone. Colleges and universities decide how many students they will admit in a given year, not students. And institutions can move these figures up or down. What's more, among the small share of undocumented students who do head to college, an overwhelming majority do so at open enrollment community colleges where there is no set limit of student slots at all. In Texas, where the two valedictorians went to high school, about 72% of undocumented students attend community colleges, and just 28% attend four-year universities of any kind. An undocumented student does not have legal permission to live in the United States, but once here, U.S. law does allow those students to study and learn in public schools without restrictions. Some states, including Texas, allow these students to pay the same amount for college as all other in-state students. And because the state offers 2 semesters of free tuition to all valedictorians, one of the young women at the center of this storm is eligible for both. Other states, such as California, do that and more. California has established a state financial aid program for undocumented students, while these same students remain ineligible for any and all aid. And around the country, at least 18 states have some type of policy on the books which aims to lower the roadblocks that keep so many undocumented students out of college. The students are here. Right now, the combined effects of low expectations, limited to non-existent financial aid, and the widespread tracking of undocumented students out of courses that prepare kids for college has created a situation in which documented immigrant students are 2 times more likely than undocumented ones to graduate from high school, said William Perez, an associate professor of education at Claremont Graduate University, who studies immigrant students and academic achievement. And, at present, only 2% of the nation's undocumented students go on to graduate from college, Perez said. 2%. One thing that has really stood out for me, Perez said, is how lost in all the uproar these 2 young women's incredible accomplishments and achievements have become. These are students who excelled despite overwhelming and incredible odds, and who, in many cases, have the capacity to and are eager to contribute to American society. Perez does not mean that in some kind of ephemeral way. Perez and his research partners have spent years studying undocumented students in states with large immigrant populations. In the process, they have found that large shares of undocumented college students and recent graduates are interested in what Perez calls service careers. That's teaching, law enforcement, medicine, and social work, or some segment of the nonprofit sector. Of course, the people who unleashed hell on these two valedictorians are not exactly alone in their thinking. In 2016, these sentiments have been a driving theme of presumptive Republican presidential nominee Donald Trump's campaign. The way Juan Escalante sees it, Trump has made anti-immigrant speech and policy the cornerstone of his campaign. Escalante works as digital campaign director at the immigrant rights organization America's Voice. He's also undocumented and a person who gained the legal ability to work through a program created by the Obama administration known as DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. We are currently navigating through some very, very scary, difficult, and dangerous times, said Escalante. What we are seeing, these girls being just one example, is the sentiment stirred and nurtured by the Trump campaign reflected in everyday life. At the same time, undocumented students around the country have been revealing and coming out, terms used by undocumented student activists to describe the act of revealing one's immigration status, with growing frequency. When Perez first began researching undocumented students a decade ago, it was difficult and rare to find undocumented students willing to speak to him anonymously for his research. These are two poles of activity, and many politicians are skilled at playing games with voters in between. For example, in Florida, Democrats tried and failed several times to pass a bill that would give undocumented students the ability to go to college and pay in-state student costs. When it seemed as if a Republican control of the legislature was at risk, the measure passed. And then Governor Rick Scott, a Republican, signed the bill into law. In March, Scott endorsed Trump. So, that's just really kind of amazing if you think about it. You don't become a valedictorian. It's not like it's just there's an opening for valedictorian and it's just there are people standing in line to get there. You earn that. Oh, I'm hitting the microphone. Wow, that's loud. You earn that right. And these two young women, these two scholars earned that place. And for that, they're being attacked. It's amazing. But that's what the politics of immigration has become. That's what it has turned into. The radicalization of the Republican Party has turned immigration into something that makes people hate other people based on their country of origin and their legal status in terms of citizenship. And if Trump has his way, according to what he says, he would take that back, and it would be not just your country of origin, but your parents' country of origin says something about you and how welcome you are here. And that's pretty disturbing if you think about it. If you think about it at all, and I hope you will, you will be as disturbed about that as I am, and you will take action about it, as I know I will. And so, on that note, I will